What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
But we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Like I said, the phone lines are closed. So I'm going to talk real slow and fill up all the empty spaces here. Now, a lot of people have been writing into me talking about this coordinated terror attack drill taking place tomorrow. It's called Operation Gotham Shield, but apparently it's taking place at other locations besides New York. And interestingly enough, it's happening on the exact same day that Carl Vinson is expected to arrive at the coast of the Korean Peninsula. And interestingly enough, it's a massive exercise, but it's not getting coverage in the corporate media. In fact, I got an email from somebody who lives in the area where one of these drills is going on and say they haven't seen anything in the local newspapers, which is unusual because normally when they're going to run a massive drill, they'll announce it ahead of time so that people don't get upset when they see helicopters and tanks and whatever else is involved there. So it's already feeling kind of weird, and a lot of people are very nervous because of all these terror drills that were taking place at the exact same moment these various false flag attacks were going on. And we're already starting to see what could be a backstory. Apparently there's been another theft of radioactive material down in Mexico, and 9 Mexican states have been placed on high alert after this material was stolen. And it's apparently iridium-192. It's got a half-life of about 80 days, and it can be used to make a dirty bomb. So that may be, if they're planning a false flag, that's going to be the source of the radioactive material in the dirty bomb. Okay, now then, turning over to the war zones here. The Syrian army is advancing on the militant stronghold of Latamina. And they've regained the initiative. Even after the cruise missile attack, the Syrian forces have regained the initiative, and they're moving forward. The U.S., meanwhile, has hit Syria with more sanctions over this supposed chemical weapons attack in Idlib. And the story never made sense. The United Nations is now saying they actually can't say where the chemical attack came from. There's zero evidence for it. The only thing that we actually know is the U.S. and its allies are refusing to allow any inspectors to investigate the scene. But they're moving forward on escalating the war in Syria and sanctions and all this. And pretty much everybody in the world knows this was a hoax, a false flag. So far, I've only met one person here on the island of Hawaii who bought the story Assad gassed his own people. And she was a nun whose business is believing what she's told to believe. But other than that, everybody agrees the story doesn't make any sense. Does not make any sense at all. All righty. Now then, Tillerson is out there waving his sanctions wand, saying sanctions on Russia will remain until Crimea is returned. They're still going along with this nonsense that Russia stole Crimea. That is not what happened. When the U.S. sponsored a coup d'etat in Kiev, the people of Crimea, knowing the government in Kiev did not represent them, voted to secede, which is their recognized right under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the United States is supposed to respect as a member of the United Nations. Then the people of Crimea had another referendum to request to join the Russian republics, and that's exactly what happened. But the U.S. position is saying they don't recognize the right of the Crimean people to vote to secede, and therefore, by default, Russia stole Crimea. Now, this is like a guest at a wedding saying that she doesn't recognize the right of the bride to choose to marry that man. Therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. That's basically how faulty this logic is here. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian army is continuing its advance into the Donbass. That is just really cranking up there. And just huge amounts of blood. I'm waiting for somebody to actually stand up and say, yeah, you got us, we're in World War III here. Ramping up things back in Afghanistan, trying to regain the initiative there. U.S. Commandeer General John Nicholson is out there saying that Russia is arming the Taliban. Oh, we're back to when Russia was in Afghanistan, and look how much trouble it took us to get them. So basically everything that's going wrong, it's all the fault of Russia. The U.S. has been stuck in the Afghan quagmire for years. They can't get out of it. The U.S. puppet regime is still only in control of about 60% of the territory, which happens to be the pipeline rights of way and the opium poppies. But if things aren't working well, blame the Russians, blame the Russians, blame the Russians. Meanwhile, showing once again how humanitarian the interventions are into these other countries. Apparently the UN is now reporting torture by the U.S.-installed Afghan government of their people is now widespread. And this, too, is a common feature of these U.S. regime changes. When back in 1953, when the U.S. overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran and they installed the Shah, along with the Shah came his secret police, the Savak, who tortured anybody who opposed the Shah's rule. Same thing with the dictator Pinochet in Chile in 1973. CIA went on down and taught those people how to torture, how to silence dissent. And we're seeing exactly the same thing happen here again. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and a quick little reminder that our phone system at RBN is not working at the moment, so please don't try and call on in. We are unable to take phone calls on the air. Okay, let's see. I forgot to ask this before. All right, now then. Apparently the situation in both Iraq and Syria is now being complicated by the Turkish airstrikes on the Kurds. We have a very unstable war environment. We don't have two sides, we have three sides, and it's just making it very, very difficult to keep the thing under control. And of course, spiraling out of control is the real danger for all of these conflicts all over the world. So let's talk about North Korea, because that is the one that everybody is really, really nervous about. Carl Vinson will be on the coast tomorrow. And we're seeing these terror drills take place. We're seeing this meeting at the White House where the entire Senate is getting a briefing on North Korea inside the White House. Not the Capitol building, inside the White House. They want it very strictly controlled. They're afraid the truth might leak in. And so we're looking at articles like this one, warontherocks.com. Why Matisse versus Kim Jong-un will end badly for us all. And we were talking yesterday about the fact that the United States never won the last Korean War. And analysts are saying for a successful invasion and conquest of North Korea will probably result in 250,000 American servicemen being killed, far more crippled. And it will cost a huge amount of money we simply do not have. Now, Nikki Haley is still out there with the rhetoric saying that the U.S. will attack North Korea if they test a nuke or if they test a ballistic missile. They're moving the goalposts here. And North Korea responded by holding a massive live fire exercise of artillery, 400 pieces firing together. And they have a lot of artillery over there. Now, at this point, I do not see Kim Jong-un attacking a U.S. military base or even testing an ICBM or a nuke at this point. I think we're going to see another false flag, because that's how the U.S. gets these wars going. And we have to be on the lookout for that. Trump is out there saying the current status quo in North Korea is unacceptable. Well, again, they're ramping up the rhetoric because nothing has significantly changed in North Korea. Yes, they've been testing nuclear weapons for a while, but this is just making up an excuse to go to another war. And they want more sanctions on North Korea. Now, as I mentioned before, the White House tomorrow will host the entire Senate for a briefing on North Korea. This coincides with the Carl Vinson getting to the shoreline, coincides with these terror disaster drills that they're running. So things are just coming to a head very, very quickly. And apparently Tillerson will be addressing the United Nations about North Korea on Friday. to go on in and basically say, well, we feel like invading and you can't stop us, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Another interesting article here, and this may be signaling, again, a false flag. U.S. Armada expects firepower display as it nears North Korea. Well, they just got one with the artillery live fire exercise. But again, North Korea will not shoot first. Both leaders are thumping their chests and trying to back the other one down. We all know that when it comes to a shooting war, North Korea does not have a single chance of winning. But they can inflict a tremendous amount of damage. And there's something I want you to think about. Remember that even after the United States destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons of mass destruction, they still continued testing bombs to make them bigger, selectable yield, multi-stage, all the rest of that stuff going on down here in the South Pacific. So, the fact that North Korea is still testing weapons is not a guarantee they do not have a deployable warhead at this moment. And that is something I hope the planners of this are going to take into account. Now, getting on back to the possibility of a false flag, and we talked about this before. Back in 2010, they tried a false flag attack to justify an attack on North Korea, and it involved the sinking of a South Korean warship, the Cheosan. And it was sunk by a torpedo. The story was North Korea snuck out to the ocean, approached this South Korean exercise, and torpedoed a South Korean warship, just one, just for the heck of it, and skedaddled away. And they dredged the torpedo up from the floor of the ocean, and they showed it along with a blueprint of the North Korean torpedo. Except that the remains of the torpedo didn't match North Korea's blueprint. They actually matched a German-made torpedo that's sold for export, manufactured for export, and it's sold to a lot of countries. And again, these countries who want nuclear weapons do not intend to attack people with them. They want them for deterrence. My parents' generation forked over $5 trillion, and that's back when $1 trillion was really a lot of money, for America's nuclear deterrent. The missile silos, the strategic bombers, the boomer, nuclear missile submarines, all of that. The idea was by having these nuclear weapons, no country would try to invade us. Okay, well, the same logic applies to other countries. Iran, Iraq, North Korea. They want nuclear weapons to discourage the United States from invading them, because the United States has been invading a lot of countries. And, footnote, the United States is the only nation on earth to actually use nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country. So there's the track record there. So, even if Saddam had had a nuclear weapon, even if Iran built a nuclear weapon, even looking at whatever it is that Kim Jong-un is playing around with, they're not going to attack another country without reason, because the response would be their entire country being annihilated. And all world leaders have monstrous egos. They go to bed at night dreaming of their face on postage stamps, or statues or coinage, and future school children forced to memorize their name and birthdays. And you don't get that if you do something that winds up destroying your own country. Okay, moving on here. Another story, this one coming out of PatriotRising.com. More war drums and a big Russian threat. And this is a very interesting article. Okay, and, I've just been told we can now accept phone calls. So our phone system is back up and running. If you want to call, 800-313-9443. So this article is basically talking about the same thing we've been saying. All of these wars are really about economics. To confine everyone to using the U.S. Federal Reserve note, to weaken territories that are resistant to U.S. control. And that's what's driving it all. They're risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in an argument over whose particular brand of ink and paper we're going to use as currency for the next 100 years. That's what this war is really all about. Now, British Prime Minister Theresa May, according to Defense Secretary Michael Fallon, Theresa May is willing to use nuclear weapons as a first strike against Britain's enemies, even if Britain is not directly attacked. This is very, very dangerous rhetoric. Most countries with nuclear weapons have vowed a no first use policy. We will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. Of course, we'll be second, third, fourth, fifth, and so forth. But May is, according to Fallon, Theresa May is now saying, yeah, I might just go ahead and attack somebody with nuclear weapons, even if we're not attacked. This is a dangerous, dangerous change in nuclear policy. Now, in response to this comment by Michael Fallon, one of the Russian members of parliament has come on back and said this talk about just hauling off and launching a nuclear attack against Britain's enemies, meaning Russia, it deserves a harsh response. And he's right, it absolutely does. Can these idiots in charge of these nations really be thinking they can survive a nuclear war? Yes, they've all got bunkers, but they're going to run out of food eventually. They're going to run out of water eventually. The air filters are going to quit working eventually. Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov is out there saying the world is on the edge of destruction. And he was making a comment similar to the one I made about Khrushchev and Kennedy. In the past, even during the Cold War, there were lines, there were bounds that nobody crossed over. There was an understanding. Today it's gone, as Theresa May or Michael Fallon has just demonstrated. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob in Las Vegas, are you there? Can you hear me?
1 second, Mike. We lost Bob. I'm going to see if he's back.
All right, fine. I guess we don't quite have all the gremlins out of our phone system. Meanwhile, Moscow has just unveiled the world's biggest nuclear submarine, and it was called Project 09852. The vessel, known as the Belgorod, is even larger than the Typhoon class. It is going to be assigned with deep sea exploration in the Arctic. And apparently Putin's new sub is based around the unfinished Ante-class missile strike carrier vessel developed by the former Soviet Union. So they're starting to recycle some of those hulls and make them into, well, in this case, it's an exploration vehicle. All right, Bob, are you there? Bob, are you there? Oh.
Sorry, we had the feed down. He thought he was cut off. He'll have to call back again. Ask him to call back.
Okay, Bob, please call on back. We're dealing with our gremlins here. You might have to wait till after the end of this next commercial break. Getting on over to our domestic politics, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody. This is over at patriotrising.com. And they have an article about constitutional attorney is out there saying Trump's America is a constitution-free zone. And looking at what's going on, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights forbids militarized police, it forbids mass surveillance, it forbids police shootings of unarmed individuals, bans SWAT team raids, no tasering of children. So they have succeeded in killing our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there with a story about how 9/11 destroyed America, and we know that was also a false flag, and it was used to bring about this new form of government that has broken free of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, just like Adolf Hitler did to Nazi Germany with the enabling acts following the Reichstag fire. So we're in serious, serious trouble here. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to come on back, and hopefully the phones will be working. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, the French first round of elections is over, and it came down to Macron and Le Pen. Now, we did have that caller in yesterday who said that in France they actually pronounce it Macron, and I guess the R is silent. But it was kind of expected that was going to be the result all along. But do you remember all the headlines about there'll be rioting, the economy will collapse, and none of which happened. I mean, yes, there were some Muslim migrants who rioted in Paris and burned up a bunch of cars, which only strengthens Le Pen's point of view. But already they're trying to lay a propaganda campaign to undermine her potential victory. And so we're seeing these stories like ABC News is out there saying the leading French candidate targeted by the group behind the DNC hacks, this research firm says. Oh, those DNC hackers. Well, we know the DNC was a leak. It wasn't a hack. And apparently Trend Micro is out there saying, oh yes, the Russians were interfering with the French election. Absolutely. Absolutely. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. By the way, I'm hearing from our control room, our phones are working, 800-313-9443. Now, establishment money is pouring in behind Emmanuel Macron. They are absolutely terrified of Le Pen because she's a Eurosceptic, she's a strong nationalist, she's a populist, and they do not want her to win. Of course, if she does win, the deep state in France may compromise her and control her the way they succeeded in doing to Donald Trump here, which was a bitter disappointment. And I'm seeing all these articles that are out there saying, well, you know, Trump's succeeding on certain things, like the immigration and whatnot. And that's all well and good. But the two most important issues for the American people right now are the economy and the wars. And on those two paramount issues for the American people, Donald Trump has basically abandoned everybody who supported him last year. We are hearing that his tax cuts are going to go to the corporations on the trickle-down theory, which Reagan used to justify corporate tax cuts. And, of course, they're rushing off to war. And I think the reason is because even with massive tax cuts to the corporations, the economy is still going to come down. It's a Ponzi scheme. It has to come down. And they're hoping that a war will distract you all from it, because that's how they got out of the mess the last two times. But it's a very different world. Most people have a different awareness of the link between banks and wars. Now then, apparently the Democratic National Committee is now being sued for cheating Bernie Sanders. Now, he did not file the suit. It's being filed by a lot of his supporters who are complaining that Debbie Wasserman Schultz took money from Bernie Sanders supporters knowing the primary was rigged. And that constitutes fraud. And when this story first broke last year, the response of the DNC was, well, you had to know we were going to throw this to Hillary, but thank you for the money anyway. All right, we're going to start with a phone call. We may have to take you through the commercial break. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Appreciate taking my call. I was just wondering, you know, everybody knows there's bunkers. They call them the elite, whoever, you know, you want to call them, Illuminati, congressmen, whatever. They got their bunkers. I mean, it's not something that nobody's not aware of. But my question to you is, before, if they knew something was going to happen, like 9/11, there's going to be some way they have to get in them bunkers. They can't just start all of a sudden stopping and running to the bunkers. It would take a while. And I was just wondering how you thought that would transpire, because in my own thought, I think there's going to be, my own thinking, I think there's going to be some kind of shutdown of the internet, a fake, electromagnetic pulse or something to shut the communications down. Give them a couple of days, or how long it takes for them to...
well, you know, we had those three major blackouts late last week, which they're saying was caused by a solar flare. Anyway, Mo, stay on the line. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. We're continuing with Mo in Florida, and take it away.
Like I said, Michael, just the logistics of moving into a bunker or some kind of protection, if they know there's going to be some kind of an exchange, limited or whatever, would take quite a while. And so they would have to have some precursor for that, something to cover their tracks and give them time to get in there. And I just kind of what you think it would be, because it's not, you know, they're not going to be exposed like this. You know.
No, they're not. But if you go back to 9/11, we certainly didn't know it before the false flag. But afterwards, it came on out that all these people in the know had somehow miraculously arranged to be someplace else. Zim Shipping had broken their lease and moved to new offices across the river. People who normally would be at the World Trade Towers were conveniently absent that day. And we'll see the same thing happening here. The thing is, given the instability of the current rhetoric, we could see a nuclear exchange happen, and a lot of people, unless they have their bunkers underneath their own home, they couldn't get to them. If it looks like there's going to be some kind of an exchange, the first thing you would look for is for Washington, D.C. To start being vacated. Congress would go to the Greenbrier. The President would go to Mount Weather. I forget where they're going to hide out the judges in the Supreme Court. Yeah, you would actually start to see that. Or they might just say we need to be in hidden locations all along, the way that Winston Churchill did. Winston Churchill, especially during the Blitz, did not stay at number 10 Downing Street. He stayed in these tunnels that were underneath London. And, of course, we know that Washington, D.C., they love tunnels over there. My understanding is there are 7 levels underneath the White House. It really is just a facade of the original building, and everything else has been replaced several times over inside. We know there are tunnels from the White House over to Blair House, to the Treasury Building, so forth and so on. So I would say probably there's a lot of bunkers right there underneath those buildings, including the Capitol building.
All right, Michael. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, as far as blacking out the Internet, like I was saying before we went to the commercial break, we had those 3 power outages in San Francisco, Los Angeles. I think the third one was in New York. And everyone was saying, cyber attack, cyber attack. The last story I got was that these were caused by the unusual solar activity we're getting. You probably heard about the hole in the corona where huge amounts of charged particles are coming on out and messing with the magnetosphere of the Earth. So that may be the story on that one. Let's go back to the phones here. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Michael. I'm going to get a little prediction here because I see a pattern here with the deep state controlling Donald Trump. I think he's going to do a 180 on this whole global warming issue. I think he's going to side with them and say, yes, we are causing global human warming. We're responsible for it all. I think he's going to go that direction. My prediction.
Yep. At this point, he's caving on all of these issues. Again, we're hearing nothing, virtually nothing, from the Vaccine Safety Commission. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was lucky enough to get one interview on Fox TV, and that's it. And so, yeah, to say that I'm bitterly disappointed in Donald Trump would be an understatement. But it is a reminder the problem is not whoever's sitting in the Oval Office. The problem is the entire system itself has become horribly corrupt and tyrannical.
You know, it's interesting that maybe 10, 15 years ago, we didn't know about a deep state. Actually, we did, but it was called something different. It was called a shadow government.
Yes.
And we knew there were power players, power brokers in the system that were probably controlling the president. And now they've come out and actually given it a name, an identity, an entity, I guess you want to say, of the deep state. And the mainstream media being, using that and actually advertising the fact that there is an agency that is over the president, that is running the president, is amazing that most Americans don't care. They don't care. I'm amazed. They go to the polls, they vote, because they think their vote matters. But now that we know there is a true deep state and the mainstream media tells you that, it undermines the whole concept of democracy and voting. Undermines it completely.
Well, it absolutely does here, because we weren't voting for Donald Trump the man. We were voting for a change of direction in our country, and we didn't get it. The American people are not getting the direction for their nation that they want.
No, I agree. Now we have voter fraud to deal with.
Yes.
We have election fraud to deal with, and now we have deep state to deal with.
Well, the vote fraud problem has actually been a big problem all along. We know that John F. Kennedy actually stole his election from Richard Nixon. We know there was massive election fraud going on back even before the computerized machines. There's a wonderful book called Vote Scam by the Collier brothers. These were the people who invented the Hawaiian Tropic line of tanning products. It made them fairly rich, and one of them decided to run for public office and, again, did not really understand how vicious and ruthless politics can be. And he lost his election to election fraud, and he wrote this book about it.
Right. You know, Michael, I think it's going to take a significant economic collapse if we have any chance of turning this around and stopping this tyrannical government. It's going to take a huge economic collapse, and they're going to have to fail at their militarized police forces and the United Nations peacekeepers to oppress us. It's going to take a huge collapse of that system that they have in place already in order to turn this thing around.
Well, that's what happened in the former Soviet Union, and frankly, I think that's the only thing that's going to save us from a global nuclear war, is for the U.S. federal government to have a Soviet-esque collapse. But even after the Soviet Union collapsed and the Russian republics were formed, the rich people, the oligarchs, were still in there trying to mess it around. And fortunately, Putin was strong enough to just kick them all out of Russia, which is another reason why they're trying to get back into Russia. But
right.
it really is a rule by money, and it's a reminder of what happens when we allow single individuals to acquire that much wealth. Inevitably, they see themselves as gods incarnate, and they start playing with the planet and its people like their own personal toys.
Right. And we need to make sure that the oligarchs don't come back in and place themselves in positions of power again once the collapse happens. We have to make sure they're gone completely.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Hey, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Getting on back to the news, there was a big stink last week over at the Huffington Post. They got tricked by this African-American gentleman who wrote an article purporting to be a white feminist activist and laying out the case for denying white men the right to vote for 20 years to punish them for all the evil they have caused in the world. And apparently Huffington Post put pressure on his company. He's now lost his job. And I was wondering, when are we going to find somebody over at Huffington Post who's going to lose their job over this? And it just happened, because one of their editors, Varashni Pillai, was the one who made the choice to go ahead and publish this article calling for white men to be deprived of their right to vote, and she has now resigned over that issue. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Bob in Las Vegas, finally we're going to get you on the air. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I just heard Steve from California, and, I was thinking I would call my congressman or congresswoman or senator or one or two senators to vent my frustration or urge them to take a certain course of action, but I don't see it that being worthwhile anymore. Why bother? They're controlled anyway.
Yeah.
Why call my congressman or senator? It's a waste of time.
We're completely disenfranchised. We are
exactly
completely disenfranchised. Even when we work to overcome election fraud and put our chosen candidate in, the candidate is then compromised. And I don't care why it happened, whether Trump was lying to us all along, whether he's being threatened, whether he's being blackmailed. I don't really care. All I know is we, the American people, didn't get the new direction for this country that we wanted. We're still on a path to economic collapse. We're still in an age of unbridled plundering by the money junkies of our society, and we're still on our path to a potential nuclear world war.
I think another way this all ends, Steve mentioned, and you'd mentioned, financial collapse or just collapse of the government. I think another way this ends is if the U.S., and I hate to say this, you hate to see innocent, these are the men and women serving the military, that the U.S. sustains a serious black eye conventionally in a military conflict with either Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea. It sustains a significant black eye, and the war does not go nuclear. It just stays conventional, and the U.S. definitively loses. That is another way that this ends. this deep state ends?
It's entirely possible. Frankly, whether this war goes nuclear or not, the United States is going to lose. Everybody loses in a nuclear war. One area where we might have a surprise development is when we go up against one of these countries, they succeed in sinking one of our carriers or carrier groups. Because more and more we're getting the impression that America's modern military weapons are more for show than actual effectiveness. And they're out there saying, you know, we've got the F-35, it's the most expensive plane in the world, and it doesn't really work all that well, but we're never going to actually use it. And we keep hearing from naval warfare experts that the carrier groups, which are basically a holdover from World War II, are in fact very vulnerable to the latest generation of sea-skimming missiles that are intentionally designed to hunt down and kill aircraft carriers.
Well, Mike, you said it before. I mean, they can't win in Iraq. They can't win against sheep herders in Afghanistan. How are they going to defeat the Chinese and the Russians together, or Iran, or North Korea? I mean, unless they use nuclear weapons or chemical or biological weapons against North Korea. But they can't defeat those forces. They can't even defeat the Iraqis. They can't defeat these non-state actors in Afghanistan or Iraq. Or Syria.
Look at the history of the Korean War. And again, the United States never actually won that one. And the death toll was just horrendous. The North Koreans absorbed tremendous amounts of punishment, and still they would not quit. And I don't think their feelings about surrender to the U.S. are any better today than they were 50 years ago. And that's why we have these analysts who are saying an attempt to militarily conquer and occupy North Korea is going to cost 250,000 American servicemen and women. And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I said there were some excellent articles on Counterpunch of what the U.S. did in Korea by Whitney, I believe his name is, and it was just awful.
Yes.
Awful what the U.S. did to that civilian population. So, okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Dan in Washington State. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call. I just want to be devil's advocate a little. I think people are being pretty impatient with Trump. I think he's done great on the immigration issue, and they haven't really allowed him to get his cabinet fully in place, so I feel like he's having to compromise or he's going to get impeached. But I think just on the immigration issue alone, I mean, he's done a lot. So.
Well, I will agree that he's done a lot on the immigration issue. It's still a problem. The liberals are still trying to fight his wall. But again, immigration was a minor issue. For most American people, the economy and the wars are the two top paramount issues, and we're not seeing a change of course on either of those.
Yeah, immigration's been my top issue for a couple decades, so it's kind of, to me, it's more important than the economy in a way, but you can't have both. But like Syria, to me, it's more for propaganda purposes. He hasn't really done anything to Syria.
Well, he's done it to us. He's made the United States government mistrusted around the world with that lame attempt to claim Assad was gassing his own people yet again, third time, 3 strikes and you're out. Everybody knows it was a lie. And that's the reputation the Trump administration and the U.S. government now has around the world. They make up fairy tales and then launch an attack on you. And that is a very, very dangerous reputation to have.
Okay, well, I just wanted to be devil's advocate. I'm still with them 60% anyway. I'm just for the immigration side, but I agree with your concerns on it, on everything else. But I feel like he has a deep plan with Syria. Like maybe that was a way to get us out of there, and then Korea, he could have to deal with China.
All he had to do was get us out of Syria. I mean, stop backing those U.S. rebels and just retire with dignity. The reason for that nonsense story about Assad gassing his own people, followed by the cruise missile strike, was to get us back into Syria, not pull on out. And whether that was Trump's policy decision or somebody was making that decision for him and threatening him to go along, again, I don't know. The end result is the war policy has not changed. And that was a major, major concern for most Americans in this last election. The economy and the war. Those are really, for most Americans, the paramount issues. Dan, we're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, Brendan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, just having trouble with the fact that we're actually funding all of this nonsense, and it's actually something that maybe we can talk about and figure out a way to stop paying for it, have a tax revolt. I'm from South Boston. Maybe it's time to throw some stuff into the bay, you know, and knock this nonsense off.
Well, yeah, I've been hearing that from a lot of places, and there have been tax revolts in the past in the face of very unpopular wars. There was certainly one during Vietnam. But at this point, I think if we understand we're not getting the government we voted for, then it's time to start delinking and just stop, you know, filling out the paper forms and stop going along with everything. It's like Gandhi said in India, you know, non-violent, non-cooperation, and just stop being involved. And because what the United States has been transformed into is not only very ugly, it is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, the tax code even doesn't say anywhere that when we trade our labor for money, it's an even exchange. It's not meant to be taxed. Trade was supposed to be taxed. And I think that we need to take up a legal argument to, you know, rein this stuff in. No taxation without representation.
The judges all work for the government, and they're all dependent on that tax money for those nice courthouses and everything. So, in theory, you are correct. In a practical sense, not so much. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to talk a little bit about the corporate media. And, boy, they've been having so many problems over at Fox News. And, yes, I understand there is a design to drag Fox News over toward the left politically. But their latest problem is Andrea Tantaros is accusing Fox News and former CEO Roger Ailes of hacking into her computer. This is a brand new lawsuit in federal court. And apparently she's now saying that executives at Fox are applying pressure to her. She calls it emotional torture, to giving up her claims that she was sexually harassed. And apparently the surveillance involved the hacking of her personal computer and the use of sock puppet social media accounts to stalk Ms. Tantaros. One of the defendants listed in the suit is current co-president Bill Shine, who, after the filing, was seen leaving a business lunch with Rupert Murdoch. So things are happening over there. And it would be nice to start seeing the corporate media tear itself apart, because they are not doing a service to the American people. They're certainly serving the oligarchy. They're not serving the American people. And there's another story, and I want to tread on this one very, very lightly, but apparently over at InfoWars, they ran a story that seemed to imply a link between the hiring practices of Chobani Yogurt. And they hire refugees. They hire refugees, and apparently up in Idaho, near their factory, there has been a sexual assault case which is still unsolved. And apparently InfoWars very recklessly implied a linkage between the two, and Chobani has now filed a major lawsuit against Alec Jones and InfoWars. And it's another reminder, if you're working in the independent media, be very sure of what you're saying before you say it. Don't get caught up in this sensationalism. And it's very easy to get caught up in that idea of going with the sensational stories, because it'll build your readership and improve your ad revenues. But if you make a mistake, well, you're pretty much going to be over and done with at that point. And that's one of the reasons why I don't always go with the sensational stories, if I can't actually confirm them. And I'll give you a good example. There's this one that's being poured all over the net about Trey Gowdy and how two of his investigators in Arkansas were tortured and killed, and he's now in hiding, blah, blah, blah. It's all over the place. There's even an article saying Trey Gowdy has issued a statement about this, coming from one of these brand new websites whose only reason to exist seems to be to pour junk onto the net so the corporate media can point fingers and say, see, they're unreliable. I contacted Trey Gowdy's office. I have not yet received a reply, but this is how you handle a story like this. You go and double check. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to talk a little bit about the economy. And interestingly enough, more and more people are coming around to the realization that all of this U.S. militarism is rooted very much in a plan to drag the world back to Bretton Woods, make the entire planet forced to use the U.S. Federal Reserve note for cross-border trade and banking to reestablish that dollar hegemonic domination. And we're seeing this other article out of Silver Doctors where Alistair MacLeod is saying exactly the same thing. The renewed desire to escalate military tensions is a front for America's continual financial war, this time directed at North Korea, Syria, and possibly Iran. And this is likely to be the opinion of China's strategic advisors. Because what this is really all about, what this clash of civilizations is really about, it's a war between banking systems. It's a war between which currency will rule the globe. Now, following World War II and Bretton Woods, the dollar was king. But it's not global anymore. Many countries have stopped using it. And they're starting to turn to other currencies, the ruble and the yuan. Those are the two biggest threats to the U.S. dollar, and both Russia and China are acquiring huge amounts of gold to back their currency, to get it away from this debt-based Ponzi scheme, private central banking scam. And as we reported yesterday, China has just found a new gold strike in their own country. It's an estimated 500 tons of gold. Now, a story coming out of Global Research up in Canada. The recent IMF meeting is signaling a descent into a global trade war. And the danger with that is trade wars, economic wars, currency wars very quickly become real shooting wars. And apparently over at the IMF, the current chair of the committee, Augustin Carstens, who's the governor of the Bank of Mexico, is out there saying that they shouldn't use the word protectionism anymore because it's kind of ambiguous. And basically, the disavowal of protectionism is an unmistakable expression of mounting trade tensions. And here's where the irony comes on in. If you have free trade, you don't need an agreement. All trade agreements are really about coercing trade. You will buy so much of what we're making here, and in exchange we will buy so much of what you're making there. And very often they're not good products. One of the major features of both the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership was the coercion of other countries to buy U.S. GMO-based products. And it was staunchly opposed by those countries who recognized that there is a danger in this technology. It is not mature. It's been very recklessly developed, recklessly deployed. There seem to be health consequences to the consumption of this GMO food, the Franken food. Now, right now we're in another housing bubble. And according to this article that we're seeing out of Investment Watch blog, it is now exceeding the peak of the 2006-2007 bubble, which preceded the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. The money junkies didn't learn any lessons from the last time because they were not required to pay for the damage. You got to pay for it. TARP, QE, bailouts. Because that's how economic fascism works. If you make money, you get to keep it, as long as you're sharing it with the government. If you lose money, the government will take money away from the ordinary working people and give it to you. Now, Polaris Industries, which makes motorcycles, is getting ready to close its plant in the northwest Iowa city of Milford. 300 employees being let go. Apparently sales are down, imagine my surprise, and they're going to be relying on their plants in Alabama, Minnesota, and California to fill their need. All right, let's grab a phone call from Fred in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Are you aware of the editorial on the April 17th by Paul Craig Roberts, Government of Morons?
Yes, it was one of his better articles. He writes very, very good articles, and we link to him all the time. We've even had him on the show on one occasion.
Yeah, I think it was excellent. Speaking of idiots and morons, you know, an idiot or moron, the height of that is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
Okay? Who in the hell voted for him? Us, the people, and RBN callers and listeners. So who are the bigger morons?
Well, we voted not for Donald Trump. We voted for a change in the course of the nation, and we didn't get it. And the lesson we have all learned from that is we are living in a dictatorship, and who's in the Oval Office is not really in control.
Oh, didn't we learn that from Reagan and Bush as the first, and Clinton, and then Bush again, and then Obama?
Yeah, but what would be happening right now if Hillary had won the White House? We'd be further along into the new war, and so I would be very hesitant to say that people were being morons. They're being cheated.
We got the GB or GD, whatever it is, transsexual in office right now because he is the epitome of what Hillary Clinton wanted to do. I didn't vote, period, and I probably will never vote again in my life.
Well, I never voted. It only seems to encourage the bastards. But right now we're realizing our democracy is basically we get to vote whether we're going to get hit with the left fist or the right fist, and then charged for the privilege, as it were. Our elections are always the lesser of two evils, and it's still evil, and it's a stupid way to be running the country.
I said this years ago when I went to when Bush was running, and then oh, for criminy sake, in your moment. But anyhow, I said to the people at the Republican convention here in Iowa, in my small town, you keep voting for the lesser of two evils. What the hell do you get? Evil, and then more evil, and then more evil with every election. We haven't elected a president in over 100 years. Would the idiot ever get this? And that includes RBN callers and listeners. Think about what the hell I said and am saying.
Well, I'm thinking about it, and I agree with much of it, but I'm not going to insult our listeners and our readers because we were trying to bring about a peaceful revolution, which is why yesterday, allow me to finish, which is why yesterday I was making that allusion to a quote from John F. Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And I'm hearing a lot of anger out there, including from you. I'm seeing a lot of anger coming into my email. And I don't know where this is going to wind up. I don't want to see a civil war or a revolution in the streets of America because the wrong people get killed and crippled in these things. But we're at a crossroads right now where it's either going to be economic collapse, bringing with it the federal government, or we're going to be in a world war. We're already in a world war. The only question is how far are they willing to take it? Will it go nuclear? But we're going to be into North Korea. And as I said before, we're getting mixed signals from China because some Chinese leaders are saying, yes, we're going to cooperate with Japan and the U.S. to rein in North Korea. And then there are other leaders in China that are saying that a U.S. invasion of North Korea is going to have to be responded to. So this thing, again, could spiral completely out of control.
That's what our government is telling us. And all the leaders of all these countries follow the ruler that runs them all. I'll admit to how much an idiot I have been. Most of my adult life, I've been an ignorant ass. And I thought John F. Kennedy was not a very nice person until I'm finally getting the facts. And why he was killed,
yes,
nobody knows. But I know, and a few people do know. And it wasn't over the banking and all this, which is a factor in it. But he was killed for religious reasons.
There's a lot of reasons. There were a lot of players in the assassination. Each had their own agenda. I don't think religion was a major factor. Anyway, Fred, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call and your opinion. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates, and the good news is the phones are working again, 800-313-9443 if you want to call on in. So we're talking about the economy here. Apparently, retailer J. Crew is announcing big layoffs at their corporate headquarters. So we're looking at a collapse of retail, because ordinary people just don't have any money to buy things anymore. They're barely paying their rent. They're barely keeping food on the table. They're barely able to pay the premiums on those mandated health insurance policies. We're absolutely tapped out. Another article coming out of Zero Hedge. The baby boomers borrowed $100 billion in student loans for their children, and the defaults are beginning to soar. There's another bubble out there, the student loan bubble. And again, it was a huge scam. Everybody was going to go to college. Everybody was going to get a college degree. Everybody was going to get a high-paying job with that college degree that they could pay the student loans back with. Unfortunately, most students going to college, they're getting trendy and fashionable degrees like art history major. It almost seems like our universities have gone so far down the path of indoctrination, they're not even really teaching real skills anymore, which is why American corporations are constantly looking for those H-1B visas to bring people to the United States from other countries where they've actually learned how to make things work. Now, here's an odd story, and I say it's odd because early today I was seeing a commercial on TV for buying silver, which is in general a good idea. They were calling it the miracle metal because it's actually been outperforming gold. But we're seeing this story about apparently how the global silver mining industry productivity has fallen to the lowest in history. And apparently, some of the mines are getting tapped out. Some of them, the unit cost of extraction is exceeding the value of the silver they're pulling on out. When metals prices are driven down, it can put the mines into a situation where they're losing money by digging the silver and gold out of the ground. So they'll just close off the mine, lock it all up, and wait for prices to go back up. Then they'll restart operation. Now, down in Venezuela, things are getting very, very ugly, and you better be paying attention because what's happening down there is likely to happen up here. For the very simple reason that the American deep state or the shadow government or the oligarchs or whatever you want to call them are treating the American people exactly the same way they're treating people in all these other countries they've regime changed. You're there to be plundered. So we're now looking at week number 4 of the clashes and riots in Venezuela. Vehicles are being burned. The police are using tear gas and pellets trying to get people to back on down. Now, remember when the government of Venezuela seized a General Motors factory, and everybody said, oh, it was an attack on General Motors. General Motors has had to fire 2,700 personnel in Venezuela because the plant is now closed. But it turns out that there was, in fact, a legal reason for the seizure. Because 2 car dealers had filed a case in 2000 for breach of contract. General Motors had not complied with an agreed sale of 10,000 vehicles. So there was a lawsuit involved, and General Motors lost it, and that was the reason for the seizure. It wasn't an attack by Venezuela on us. Well, despite that clarification, story coming out of Global Research, Maduro has basically come on out and said that the United States government, the State Department, has given the green light the approval for a coup d'etat to intervene in Venezuela. And Venezuela knows of where they speak because the U.S. has had coup d'etats down there before. When Hugo Chavez was running the place, they succeeded in ejecting him for about a week. And we know that Venezuela has been on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list for a very, very, very long time, for daring to sell their oil to China for the yuan, and for daring to spend the wealth of the nation on the people of the nation. That sets a bad example. We can't have that in this world here. Now, as you know, President Trump and Congress are coming up to this deadline on Friday for an emergency spending bill, which is basically admitting the government still cannot live within their means. And it looks like we may be heading for a shutdown over the issue of Trump wanting some funding for his border wall, which is being staunchly opposed by the liberal Democrats. And the ridiculousness of it all is underscored by the fact that the wall request, the requested money for the border wall, is basically 0.035% of federal spending. In other words, we're talking about 35/100ths of 1%. But the liberal Democrats are still up in arms. We can't have a border wall. And again, they may actually be right, but not for the reasons they're thinking. Because already we are, and I will acknowledge this Trump is working on this. Illegal immigration to this country is slowing way, way down, because the lure of free stuff is going away. And we're still having all these fights about sanctuary cities and so forth and so on. Now, we've been hearing about United Airlines, and they're back in the headlines again. And this one's a little scary. There was a United flight from Costa Rica to Houston, and they lost an engine, nearly crashed during the emergency landing, and for all the fear and terror and inconvenience, the passengers were each given a $10 voucher from United Airlines. Okay. I think they did more damage with the voucher than just saying, you know, we're sorry. $10 is an insult. Now, there is a lawsuit making its way through the courts in Kansas, and it could be a game changer for gun rights. Now, this man in Kansas is being tried for manufacturing and selling firearms and silencers without a federal license. And it is turning into a challenge on the constitutionality of the National Firearms Act of 1934, as well as every subsequent firearms law passed. At issue is whether it is the states or the federal government that has the constitutional right to pass gun laws. Certainly the federal government is limited in passing gun laws by that Second Amendment. So if the courts find that this law is unconstitutional, the gun grabbers are going to start shooting up malls and schools just to try and get back on track there. If you go over to my Right to Keep and Bear Arms page, I recently added a photo somebody sent me. It's a photo taken in a classroom at a public school in 1956. What are they teaching in this classroom in 1956? Gun safety. And you see these kids there. One of them is holding a shotgun, and he is making sure the breech is clear, making sure there's nothing in the chamber. And I think that's a good idea. It's time to demystify guns. Instead, we're going the other way. We've got these live fire drills running through schools to traumatize children. So when they see a gun, they get upset. It is saddening to see how much this nation has declined just in my lifetime. But it has declined. It is not the nation I was born in. We'll be right back after these. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, getting on over to liberal political correctness. Bill Maher is out there, and this is one of the few times I agree with him, saying that all of this college anti-free speech warriors, it's the liberals' version of book burning. We've been saying exactly the same thing here. Political correctness is an attempt to trick you into censoring yourself with this idea that you should never say anything or even think anything or do anything that would be a microaggression to anybody else. And it's an impossible task, because there are way too many people walking around our society whose entire sense of self-worth is based on always finding something to be offended by. Now, Kurt Schlichter has another point of view, and this is over in Post News D2 blogspot, saying liberals want to kill free speech. So we patriots are going to have to fight back, and we are. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Fran from Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha nui nui, Michael.
Aloha nui nui.
Yeah, I've been wanting to call you for a bit of time, but you nailed something on the head just before the commercial. The feeling that this is not the country we grew up in, we were told we had. I'm older than you.
You have my deepest sympathies.
I know. And the fact of the matter is, of course, you know that our parents were lied to, our grandparents were lied to, and the lies have gone on into damn near infinity.
Yes.
So, yeah. And I wanted to commend you as a soldier of the truth, that sometimes these days when we're going so wrong, rather than crawling into a bottle of scotch or something, you have soldiered on and continued doing the important job that you do for all of us, even though, I tell you, in the last week or so, it's like I'd like to crawl into a hole and pull it in behind me.
Well, I'm going to let you on a little secret here, Fran. I don't drink scotch anymore. I drink cheap vodka, and you know. But yeah, and I will admit to it. I've even got somebody just sent me an email. Why aren't you smiling right now? I am feeling very disheartened by the outcome of this last election. And, you know, over the last 22 years, Claire and I have sacrificed a lot. We've had a very difficult life. I don't feel like belaboring all that we've been through. But had we diverted the nation's course away from war, it would have been worth it. But now, after all of that effort and you know, the situation that we're in now in our 60s, to still find ourselves on that path to war, Claire and I are both very upset about that. And you know, there are some days when I think about turning the WhatReallyHappened.com website into an online church or something and try and make a fast buck. But it's a very discouraging time right now.
Yeah. Well, you deserve every accolade you receive from us, your loyal listeners. And I will let you go with that, my dear.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and we'll let you go as well. Now then, we mentioned this in passing, but it's starting to really pick up. Remember those riots at Berkeley about a week ago, and the corporate media was telling you it was all about people still demanding to see Donald Trump's tax returns, which struck me as kind of flogging a dead horse. Well after the fact, and personally, I'm far more interested in Hillary Clinton's deleted emails than I am in Donald Trump's tax return. But as it turned on out, there was a lady who was actually at those demonstrations who posted a video saying the demonstrations had nothing to do with Donald Trump's tax returns. Oh my goodness, the corporate media was lying yet again. It was the reaction to Berkeley canceling Ann Coulter's speaking engagement there. And now Berkeley is being sued by conservative groups and their own students over the cancellation. And this gets right on back to what we were saying with all these people saying liberals want to stifle free speech. They want total control over what you see, read, and hear. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And let's see, getting on back here to the top of the talking points. On this issue of an attempt to destroy our sense of identity and self, apparently down in New Orleans, they have begun removing all of the Confederate monuments. And apparently the public outcry has been so serious, the demolition crews are being protected by the police. And so the purge of our history is underway. And all of this represents an attack on our sense of self, who we are, where we come from. Because people who have a strong identity are much harder to control than people who don't know who they are, where they came from, what they're supposed to believe, what restroom they're supposed to use. Your history, your culture, your region, those are the bedrock on which your identity and personality is based, and that's what they're trying to take away. Right now, according to an article that came out of 12160, there are no less than 187 George Soros-funded groups at work inside the United States of America to destabilize and blur our society, bring in the refugees and the immigrants to get us prepared to merge with the global government and the new world order. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I heard yesterday from you that did Russia and China make an agreement where if either one of them was attacked, it would be like attacking both of them, you said?
Well, they have not had a formal treaty or announced it, but the story that I read said that Russia and China responded to a comment by the U.S. government that the U.S. was succeeding in splitting China and Russia apart, and Russia and China came back and said, absolutely not, you have no idea how deep our relations go. And word coming out of NATO headquarters is that the signals they're getting from Russia and China is that Russia and China are a unit and will fight as a single entity if either one is attacked. Now, it's not been formalized. It's not being announced in the media. I think that's an intention to not let the situation escalate and not look provocative. But they're basically starting to draw up the lines and say, we know that sooner or later the U.S. is coming for us. That's obviously where this pattern of conquest is going. Pick off all the little tiny nations that can't defend themselves, and then based on that record of success, go on in starting with larger and larger, more powerful nations until finally it's going to be the U.S. and all of its captive provinces against Russia and China. And again, it's a very, very dangerous, reckless policy.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I heard, and I don't know if you know anything about this, but I heard that, like, even Germany denied sending planes in the to the war, and where we fight in Russia, I forget where, Ukraine.
Yeah.
That they denied to send the warplanes. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that, and while the leaders of the European member states, and certainly Brussels, are all gung-ho for a war because they think a war with Russia will reunite the EU out of fear. Most ordinary people in Europe, they can see where this is going, and they do not want a new world war because the last two were fought in part on their territory. And for people in Europe, the scars are still visible. You can see the scars from both world wars when you travel around Europe. Here in the United States of America, the last war we had on our own soil was the Civil War, and as we just reported, they're trying to erase all traces of that. So for most Americans, war is an abstraction, something they see on TV shows and movies. And unless they serve in our own armed forces, they haven't seen it with their own eyes. And so the people of Europe are very much opposed to all of this.
Well, let's hope. I mean, I don't choose it to be Trump's first policy, but let's hope that maybe Trump's looking at it like our allies that used to be our NATO allies are tired of funding the war effort of the United States. It's like NATO has lost its whole purpose. We're more of an aggressive entity as opposed to one that is there in the event that we need to be on the defensive.
You're absolutely correct.
I mean,
NATO was originally formed to create a block of nations willing to defend each other against a potential Russian invasion. Russia never invaded. But it has mutated over the course of time to be an aggressive force going into all these countries. And again, the media is screaming, we've got to counter Russian aggression, we've got to counter Russian aggression. But we can see with our own eyes who's actually being the aggressor here.
Yeah, so let's just hope that I think if it comes down to it, I think NATO, the countries in NATO aren't going to go along with this evil war, even though wars, I should say, plural, even though I believe that there are controlling factors of like the deep state, even in our allies like Germany and England and the rest of them, you know?
Well, you need to understand, certainly in Europe, they're under the control of the globalists, the New World Order planners. And certainly the leaders of the European Union member states are all gung-ho for globalism because they dream of one day their particular bottom sitting on that golden throne of planet Earth. But there are two major impediments to the completion of the New World Order. One is Russia and one is China.
Yeah, so let's just hope that Russia and China stand firm with the fact that they're going to oppose our aggressions throughout the world. I mean, they're bogus. And isn't Tony Blair facing some trouble for his participation in the Iraq War?
They just gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. He's not going to be prosecuted.
That sucks.
Yes,
bad.
It does.
And
yes, it does.
That's the globalist. That's not the will of the people. That's the globalist that gave him that get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yes.
He probably gave... Hillary Clinton probably gave him a couple of her cards.
Yeah, she does seem to have quite a few of them. We're seeing all over Europe and here in the United States of America, we have become a two-class society. The ruling class can do whatever they want, and they'll never be caught or punished. And the lower classes, of course, you know, we'd better, gosh darn well, obey all the laws that are being created every single day or we'll be in trouble.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that, well, I'm hopefully thinking that it's really not going to matter the aggression of this country, the deep state. I think that the world knows that we're the aggressors. I think Hitler doesn't have his clothes on right now, I should say. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and the issue is going to be Russia and China don't want war. In fact, none of these countries the United States has invaded wanted wars, and they got them anyway. But I think the remaining powers, which are Russia and China primarily, they're rapidly approaching the point where they're not going to be able to back down anymore, or the hardliners within their own governments are going to start talking about a change of leadership. And it's not a very pleasant position to be in. But also has to be in the back of the head of the Russian and Chinese leadership that the end result of continuing to back down is to lose their national sovereignty to this new world order. At some point, it's going to flare up. It's unavoidable. We can see we're on a path to war.
That's right. And we really need to prosecute the Obama administration for their crimes against the other party, I should say. I mean, they're spying on us, and they're just doing all kinds of illegal crap. I mean, I hate the way that the deep state can just sweep that under the rug. It needs to be discussed more often. And
well, I'm in agreement with you. I'm absolutely offended that we have people who are able to get away with crimes, admit to the crimes on national TV, and still escape prosecution, as Hillary Clinton did. James Comey sat there on TV and went down the list of felony Title 18 violations Hillary Clinton committed, and then said, we're not going to prosecute. And Loretta Lynch said, I'm taking Jim Comey's recommendation, and that was the end of it. That was absurd.
Yeah. And let's just face the fact that Bernie Sanders was the best option for us, and he was cheated on. I mean, he was the one that was for the public option. He was the one that was wanting the Palestinians to have a voice in the peace agreement.
No, I like Bernie Sanders. I like Bernie Sanders. If he'd won the nomination, I would have supported him instead of Trump.
Yeah, if they wouldn't have cheated on him, he would have won. I heard some polls are out that he's the most popular politician in the United States right now.
Well, he's certainly giving Ron Paul a run for his money.
Yes, but I do like Ron Paul, I'll tell you that.
Oh, so do I. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to get rid of all of our military bases all over the world. That's the biggest joke in the world, that we're everywhere, and we shouldn't be.
Well, you know, Rome had to garrison its empire. Rome had to have garrisons all over its empire to keep those provinces from breaking away. That's what the legions were for. The legions were spread all over the Roman Empire to slap any uppity countries back in line. What happened, and we could see a repeat in the modern era, is when Rome lost those 3 legions in Germany, they no longer had enough legions to effectively police the empire, and all of a sudden those outlying provinces began to break away, like Great Britain. And that was the beginning of the end, the decline of Rome, and broke into the Eastern and Western empires, and the Western Empire basically failed. They were dealing with a pandemic, a civil war, and a foreign war all at the same time, and they couldn't hold up. Now, the same thing is true with the United States. Again, looking at the apparent consistent quality problems with U.S. military product. They may be just a giant bluff. They look really impressive, but we keep hearing from military analysts that they may not hold on up, that the carrier groups, which are holdover from World War II, are very vulnerable to missiles like the Zircon, which travels at Mach 10. And all it would take would be the loss of one carrier group to basically send the message to the rest of the world that the U.S. military is really just a paper tiger, and that would completely change the global dynamic.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that that happens in the way of France voting to leave the European Union and then voting to get out of NATO, and let's hope it happens that peaceful.
Well, I would like to see that.
Military route.
I'm expecting the second round of French voting to have incredible amounts of election fraud, and if Marine Le Pen succeeds in winning, she'll either be blackmailed or threatened or co-opted the way Donald Trump was. And that leaves us back with 2 choices: economic collapse and collapse of our government, which is my first choice; global war, potentially nuclear, my last choice. Okay?
Yeah. Or civil war, too.
I don't want to see that. I really do not want to see
I hear that.
You know, I really want to discourage it. But on the other hand, looking at what's going on, you know, between the liberal snowflakes and everybody else, it's almost like the fighting in the streets has begun. Alex, we're going to let you go. We're going to take a phone call from Ramsey in Canada.
Bye, Michael.
Bye-bye. Ramsey, are you there? Ramsey in Canada, you're
Hello?
on the... Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
See, sir, I just want to get your comment on something that I've heard, and also ask you a question. I've heard that the United States is aggressive towards North Korea, like it is, because North Korea had an agreement, had a trade deal with Iran, giving Iran weapons and all that, and also they supported the Palestinians, like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority or whatever. So and the United States is aggressive, wants South Korea, which recognizes Israel, and they want, like, so the United States wants North Korea and South Korea to always be divided.
Well, certainly, I mean, politicians in both Koreas have been talking about reunification the way Germany did. It's called the Sunshine Policy. And the leading presidential candidate for the upcoming South Korean elections is fully in favor of that. and has already sent a message that if he wins the election, he wants the United States to get out of South Korea, and they'll make their own deal with North Korea, which is what I think has ramped up the timetable for the North Korean invasion. Now, as I've said many, many times, wars and assassinations never happen for one single reason. They happen when you have a group of individuals or entities or agencies who all have their own particular agenda, but they all agree that agenda is served by the war or the assassination. John F. Kennedy, for the Texas oil billionaires, it was the oil depletion allowance. For organized crime, it was the sense of betrayal by sicking his brother Robert on them. For Israel, it was Kennedy's refusal to allow them to acquire nuclear weapons. For the Federal Reserve, it was Executive Order 11110, and on and on and on. So the same thing applies to North Korea. We had an article the other day where North Korea, because of their economic hardships, is now allowing the opium trade again, and that is cutting into the CIA's drug profits. That's one agenda. Certainly the United States does not want to see the Koreas reunified because their goal is to keep countries in little tiny pieces that are easy to push around and bully. And ultimately, I still think the intention of going into North Korea is an attempt at creating a backdoor war, or a backdoor to war with China. And I don't think China is falling for this nonsense that the U.S. is going to stop with North Korea, because China understands that yuan, especially the gold-backed yuan, is one of the ultimate targets of the U.S. war. Okay?
Yes, sir. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks an awful lot. All right, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and they do seem to be working quite well. Now then, interestingly enough, stories just now coming on in. U.S. District Judge William Orrick has issued a ruling that blocks Donald Trump's executive order to cut off funding to cities that limit cooperation with immigration authorities. And I really wish Donald Trump would step on in with all of these judges, because they are in violation of existing U.S. law, Title VIII. And when they're out there basically aiding and abetting illegal immigrants, they are in fact in violation of Title VIII, and they're subject to a 5-year prison term. And I think Trump needs to start showing a little more spine. Fortunately, he has not shown a tremendous amount of that so far, so I don't have my hopes up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're just now getting word. Apparently, the U.S. military is now deploying the Theater High Altitude Area Defense anti-missile system into South Korea. It's very controversial. A lot of people are very upset about it. To the best of my knowledge, it's never actually been used in combat. So this upcoming war with North Korea may see the testing of just how capable the U.S. military really is against a little tiny nation that really doesn't have much in the way of a military, other than for defensive purposes. But that's starting to happen here. Over at Journal Neo, they have this funny article here. The Russians are coming. No, wait, it's the zombies. No, the Nazis are back. And they're spoofing the constant fear-mongering coming out of the corporate media, which is intense. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's fear-mongering. It's war-mongering as hard as they can. Apparently over in Oakland, 40 to 60 teens swarmed a BART train and held up all the riders. And we've lost our moral compass as a nation. Now, I'm making the assumption that these are American citizens, American kids who did it. They're not saying who it was. But we really do seem to have lost our moral compass. And that's another way that the nation I thought I was born into doesn't exist anymore. Now, a little bit of good news. Out in California, and by the way, that judge who just blocked Trump's executive order is another California judge. For sure, for sure. Gag me with a spoon. The NRA has filed lawsuit against California over the sweeping set of bills signed into law last year by California Governor Jerry Brown. It's the first of the first of 6 lawsuits to basically overturn the different aspects of the California law. And the law, of course, was rushed through following the mass shooting in San Bernardino. And basically one of the arguments they're making is that these laws are effectively demonizing perfectly law-abiding sport shooters, and specifically targeting the AR-15, which, again, you don't see people holding up stores with AR-15s. Criminals like small, inexpensive, concealable, if possible, disposable firearms for their crimes. They're not going to walk into a store carrying an AR-15. Everybody can see it. And AR-15s are very pricey. But the U.S. government is still intent on disarming us all any way they can, and the NRA is fighting back here. Okay, let's see. Now, as we come up to the top of the hour, another flip-flop on Donald Trump. When he was campaigning, he loved WikiLeaks. When we come back from station identification, he's singing a different tune. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I'm looking at this BART train robbery, and apparently this has been an ongoing problem for a few weeks. What made this last one notable was the sheer number of juveniles who took part. And they don't have an accurate count, and apparently because all of these perpetrators appear to be minors, photos and such are being withheld. But apparently it is a big, big problem where they're just jumping onto the trains, looting the people, and leaving. And we've lost our moral compass as a nation. What are these kids learning from their parents? Or are both parents working, forced to work? Which means the kids are learning their social skills from TV and movies. And what is the public school teaching them? I mean, again, I grew up in farming country, and this is an urban area. I never saw anything like that when I was a kid. Very, very different world. Now then, we were talking about Donald Trump and his relationship with WikiLeaks, because during the campaign he was out there saying he loved WikiLeaks, and, because WikiLeaks was putting out all this information that was detrimental to Hillary Clinton. And they also put out, I mean, they were being fair and objective. They also had some stuff on Bernie Sanders, not much on Trump. And Donald Trump loved it, loved WikiLeaks. He thought it was wonderful. Well, now he's the president, and he's done another 180-degree switch. CNN is reporting, citing anonymous, the usual anonymous intelligence community sources, that the Trump administration's Justice Department was seeking the arrest of Assange and had found a way to charge the WikiLeaks founder for publishing classified information without charging other media outlets such as the New York Times and Washington Post, who published the exact same information. Now think about that one for a while. When WikiLeaks publishes it, it's a crime. When the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost publish the same exact classified information, they are not going to be charged. Now, as you know, Marine Le Pen is saying that if she wins the presidency of France, she's going to grant French citizenship to Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, which I think would be a really good thing. We included on today's WhatReallyHappened.com page a link to a video of a speech by John F. Kennedy, where he talks about secrecy and it being a threat to a democracy. And you listen to that speech and you realize just how right he was, how prophetic he was. Because now we're living in a society where our lives are wide open to be spied on and surveilled, and all of our corporate executives and politicians are just hidden from view because they don't want you to see what it is they're really doing. So you ought to go back and take a look at that JFK speech. Now, Ron Paul is out there defending Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and he says basically if you love WikiLeaks and you want to bomb it, it's the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys, the ones with secrets to keep, are the ones who hate WikiLeaks. Of course, anytime you've got somebody engaged in a crime or a constitutional violation, they're going to be very upset when it's exposed. I mean, I went through that 23 years ago when I pointed out that Vince Foster obviously did not commit suicide. He was murdered and got my career destroyed. So that's how it works. Ron Paul continues, Assange is a hero. Going after Assange, you're declaring war on the truth. And that's a very widespread phenomenon we're seeing in our entire society, a war on the truth. They even have a name for it, the post-truth society. They're literally out there saying facts and truth don't really matter. It's what you feel. It's what you believe that matters. If you believe Russia is evil, then that's all you really need. No, I think I want to know the reality before we do something like drop bombs on other people. Now, as we mentioned before, the global spy agencies, the Five Eyes organization group, they're down in New Zealand having a little meeting, and basically they have the representatives from the 5 participating countries: United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain. And the United States, rather. So they're basically down there, and they're having a big conference. And I imagine a big topic of that conference is how they're going to go back to being invisible to the general public. Because the Five Eyes, or Echelon program, goes all the way back to the 1980s. Think about all that time it was going on, and you did not know it existed. But now you do. And you find out that the very reason for Echelon and the Five Eyes system was so that the spies in one country could spy on the citizens of another country and then trade that information to the intelligence services of that country so they could say, we're not spying on our own people. The other country is spying on us. We're just trading them for the information. These days, they don't even really care if there are laws against spying on us. The Fourth Amendment, they don't care. Now, here's a very bizarre story, and I don't know if this is really a threat or just another boondoggle. This is out of 12160.info. And apparently, this is being reported from The Intercept, where the NSA has a 62-foot diameter airship called the Hover Hammer. And apparently it is this blimp that was caught illegally spying on people in New York. It's got an eavesdropping device, and it flies overhead, and it spies on whatever it's designed to spy on. So, my feeling about that is it's another one of these bluffs. They want you to see the blimp. They want you to think they're spying on you. I mean, we know from the Hindenburg and the Shenandoah how easy it is to bring those airships down. And remember, during World War II, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany deliberately cultivated a public image of being able to see everything, hear everything, virtually read the minds of all the German people. And it was, of course, impossible. They didn't have the manpower, anywhere near the manpower. It was just this bluff. Not to say anything. Because you might be heard. The Gestapo was everywhere. They've got informants everywhere. And it was a bluff, and unfortunately the German people fell for it. Now then, WebRoot Security Tools, which is a fairly prominent company, apparently made a goof. They went berserk today, and they were mislabeling key Microsoft Windows system files as malicious and temporarily quarantining them, basically breaking the PCs in the process. And it hit home users, business editions, managed service providers. Everybody got hit by this. And apparently, WebRoot's system labeled operating system data as W32 Trojan Gen, meaning a generic Trojan-infected file. And they're trying to recover from that one. Now, there is a bit of a problem with security software, and you probably ought to be aware of it. And that is what's called a false positive. And that is where, because the cyber criminals are working to make their code, their weapons, as invisible and transparent as possible to evade detection, they're often made to look like real system files. And sometimes security software will look at real system files and falsely label them as containing malware, which is obviously what happened here with WebRoot. And it can be a real problem. So if you are using security software on your computer and it's scanned on through and said, here are all the malwares you've got, don't just hit select all and delete. You have to make a point of going through one by one and checking them. Is this really malware, or has it hit a system file and flagged it incorrectly? One of the best ways to do that is if your security software allows you to sort by date. You look at the most recent ones, and obviously software, drivers, whatever that were installed 2 months ago can be pretty much assumed to be okay. But it is an issue, and there have been some cases where security software will have more false positives of genuine system files than they find real malware. It's like open season on computer users right now. All right. This is where things are getting a little bit bizarre. Apparently, U.S. intelligence sources announced that terrorists can now smuggle explosives into airplanes using laptops. And as a result, they're getting ready to have a ban on laptops on planes originating from Europe. Now, that means laptops in the cabin. You can have them in your checked luggage, where TSA can steal them, or as they did in my case, drop and smash them. And I think this is probably going to discourage a lot of people from even traveling because they understand putting anything of value in the checked baggage is an invitation for it to not complete the trip. I remember going through Heathrow Airport in London. I lost a Walkman player. Now, the reality is, if you know anything about the inside of a laptop, there is no room in there at all. None at all. And more modern laptops don't even have a CD drive. So you don't have that empty space either. So I think it's another case of booga booga, followed by further inconveniencing of the American or of the traveling public. Now, we were talking a while ago about how the FBI was caught out running their own child porn website. And basically what it is they identified the site, they took it over, they threw the perpetrator in jail, and then they kept the website going to try and trap all the customers. And I can understand the rationale of that possible approach, but it does border on entrapment. And you also have the problem about what do you do about people who logged into that porn website for the very first time while the FBI was running it. If the FBI hadn't been running it, they wouldn't have logged in. Well, apparently, according to a story that just came out over in 12160, apparently the FBI was running 24 dark web child porn websites. And I'm starting to wonder just how much of the child porn problem is actually being generated by the government itself. We know that a lot of these so-called terror attacks that are thwarted by the FBI involve entrapment. FBI informants find some patsy. They get them all talked up about doing something about the evil United States. They give them money and weapons, and then they swoop in, make the arrest, and say, huzzah, huzzah, are we not great? And then 6 months down the road, the defendant gets cut loose because it is obviously entrapment, but they got the headlines out of it. They get the budget boost. See, we're doing good work. Don't cut our budget. And it's certainly a lot easier to entrap somebody than to actually go on out and find the real criminals. The FBI is not the swell bunch of Joes you see on movies and TV shows. They just don't. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Brian in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good.
I was just calling to talk about Jason Chaffetz.
Yeah.
And him announcing that he's not going to run again next year. And I even read on one source that he might not even finish out his term this year.
Yes.
That really concerns me. He has been a shining light in our Congress and in our Oversight Committee. I'm from Maryland, and we have people in there like Elijah Cummings, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's almost like the male version of Maxine Waters.
That's bad.
Yeah, it seems like he just pretty much throws up the propaganda that the liberal media puts out there. And it just really worries me to see people like Jason. I don't know if he's throwing his hands up and leaving or what's up. But
well, the story that I heard is that one of the earlier investigations he was in charge of turned out to be a government cover-up itself, and that he was being threatened with an investigation by his own committee of his actions. And it looks like this is definitely a political hatchet job to get rid of him. And I think next they're going to find some way to target Trey Gowdy.
I agree totally. And if they do get Trey out of there, boy, we are in trouble. And
we're already in trouble.
We have people like, yeah, you're right about that. Luckily, we do have a few people like that in Congress, and we're even more lucky to have a few people like you in the alternative media that will tell us the truth. We're very thankful for you. I've been listening to you for about a year now, and I love the work you do.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and it's really kind of nice to hear because right now this is a very discouraging, disheartening time, and yeah, it's rough. Yeah, it's been very, very rough.
But I really appreciate it. It's an honor to talk to you. It's my first time calling in, and I'll let you go.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jack in Louisiana. Aloha, Jack. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I got told that all these new laptops don't have the disk drive and all the plug-ins on them. But 3 weeks ago, I went and bought a HP nice laptop, a little less than $400. And by golly, it's got HDMI, all the USB outlets, and the disk drive, the CD player, and it even had a Photoshop in it.
Oh, well, good. That's a find. Absolutely, it's a find. But before we talk about explosives inside a laptop or inside somebody's underwear or whatever the next nonsense story is going to be, you need to understand that how powerful an explosive is not just its chemical makeup, but how it is shaped and tamped. And taking explosive and spreading it through the innards of a laptop, it's not going to get the opportunity to build a strong concussion or shock wave. It'll certainly blow the laptop apart, but probably not much of anything else around it. That's what happened with the so-called crotch bomber. It wasn't properly shaped and tamped. Getting an explosive to produce the maximum effect, that takes a lot of skill. You got to know what you're doing. And just taking an appliance and pouring explosive into it, you're not going to get a powerful result.
Yeah, all your tank rounds are shaped charge explosives, the high explosive ones.
Some are tungsten penetrators, the silver.
Yeah, well, no, tungsten went away in '82. We uploaded depleted uranium.
That's right. It's depleted uranium now. There's the so-called Hesh round. There's all kinds of different munitions, dime rounds, aerial denial rounds. But shaped charges are more used on things like torpedoes, where you're going to have a good solid contact with the target.
Yeah, HEP, high explosive plastic tank shell, and HEAT, high explosive anti-tank, they were both shaped charges. And I attended the secret briefing in '82 in Germany when they uploaded the DU, and they took off the tungsten. And they told us tungsten penetrates no better than the DU, and if you take one breath off the smoke of burning DU, you will get sick anywhere from 2 weeks to 20 years. Won't say in that time frame when you get sick, but you will get sick.
I actually had that happen to a colleague back in my Amiga developer days, and he'd served in the very first Iraq War, and he had been a loader on the A-10 with depleted uranium shells, and apparently he was downwind when they were used, and he did inhale a bit of the smoke, and he died of cancer. And so, yeah,
that's right.
that really
Years
did happen.
ago, I can't find it, but Time magazine had some GIs right on the front cover, and they were MPs in the first Iraq War, and they were just in the dust, and their children were coming out deformed right in Time magazine, and they checked them for DU, and they were DU hot.
Yeah, that's a big stink they're trying to keep under wraps, is the families of our returning veterans are having massive birth defects because of the DU. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Fukushima is back in the news again, especially in the news. And there are growing concerns that, in point of fact, uncontrolled nuclear chain reactions may be occurring underneath the plant. The reactors are still melting down way in the ground, and it's burned through containment. And they're now estimating that Fukushima amounts to 12 Chernobyls. They're never going to get that one cleared up. The official story is it'll take 100 years. I don't think so. I don't think they're ever going to be rid of it. They'll just pave it on over and say it's just natural for people in this part of the world to get cancer. Now then, let's see. We have Europe crop losses, record snow and cold with more in May. This is a YouTube video. Somebody was sending me a photo, a listener. It's snowing in Sheffield, England. Apparently, several parts of Scotland are getting snow showers, and it's going to continue there. And then finally, over in Minnesota near Duluth, they have issued an ice storm warning. And they're saying it's going to be glare ice, very, very dangerous. You should have your chains on the car. Now, this brings us back to Al Gore, who has put together yet another group to fight human-caused global warming. And they are calling for all of the countries of the world to cough up $600 billion a year for the next 2 decades to boost green energy deployment and energy efficiency equipment to fight global warming, even as we have a winter that continues to linger and linger and linger. Total cost, $15 trillion. That's why Gore came out with his sequel, The Inconvenient Sequel, which, by the way, is not doing very well at the box office. But they're still out there pushing this scam. Human-caused global warming, human-caused global warming. I'll let you in on a little secret. The human impact on the environment is microscopic compared to that of solar radiation, fluctuations, cosmic rays, which control the rate of cloud formation, and obviously the more clouds you have, the more sunlight bounces back into space, and the cooler the Earth becomes. CERN actually confirmed that. So, it's just more of the same nonsense. It's more of that same nonsense. Human-caused global warming. Now then, this is a cool idea. I actually like this one. Adidas is starting a new line of shoes that are partly made with recovered ocean trash. They're going to have them in the stores by the end of 2017. Each pair of shoes will use an average of 11 plastic bottles. This is a really, really cool idea because you probably heard that here in the Pacific Ocean, just north of us, trapped in that North Pacific Gyre, is the Pacific trash pile. It's actually 2 of them. They bump up against each other. And a lot of people have been saying, what could we possibly do with it? Well, now it's going to be turned into a resource that can be harvested with a dredge and recycled. And I think that is a really, really good idea. because that trash is very harmful to ocean life, including the ocean life that we like to eat. And that ocean life is already suffering from things like the Gulf oil disaster and Fukushima and overfishing. Let's be very honest. There is a problem with overfishing going on right now. Now, Claire has been talking about female genital mutilation, which is an ugly, ugly, ugly tradition. We were talking a couple of weeks ago where some doctor here in the United States has been arrested for doing this to girls without their permission. Well, over in Great Britain, UKIP now wants mandatory checks on young girls to make sure this is not being done to them. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Moscow has now officially commented on the claims coming out of France that Macron's election was tampered with by Russia. And they're saying it's nothing but fake news. And yes, we know that's exactly what it is. That's all our corporate media knows how to do anymore. So they're out there, oh, anything bad, it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. Now, speaking of Russia, story that just came out of Press TV, the U.S. is deploying F-35 fighter jets to Estonia, right on the doorstep of Russia, to send a signal. We're ready for you when you invade. And Putin's going to come back and say, I wasn't planning on invading. I have enough problems here in Russia. I don't need Europe's problems. I don't need the U.S. problems. And they're going to be flying these F-35s all over the region to familiarize pilots with the region, which I thought you could do that in a simulator. Basically, it's a tour. They're showing off the plane to say, see how mighty we are, to people who have not been reading the reports about all the problems the F-35 has. Very alarming story, this one out of Sputnik News. Officials are now advising citizens in Japan what to do if they get an alert that North Korea has launched a nuclear missile at Japan, and warning that citizens may have as little as 4 minutes to get to safety, ramping up the fear. Now you realize now that THAAD is on station, now that the U.S. Armada is on station with its Aegis ships, if North Korea gets a missile through to Japan, doesn't matter if it's nuclear or not, if they get a rocket through to Japan, it will be seen as a failure of the American military. Remember during the second war in Iraq, and they were out there, we've got the Patriot, it's got a 95% success rate. And then after it was all over, experts came back and said, well, more like 50% really. And then further down the road, they came on back and said, well, actually, it was only about 30%. And they thought they were intercepting Scuds with biological weapons. Well, even if you hit one of those with a Patriot, its payload is still going to come down someplace. So there may be an issue there as well. Now let's talk about science and health here. The world's oldest person has just passed away, 117 years old. And basically, the lady Emma Morano was asked, how did you live so long? And she said, I ignored medical advice. Which, yeah, I think that might have something to do with it. Now, John Rappaport has a new article out where he likens the vaccine support as more in line with a cult and a religion than with actual science. And we've seen that with human-caused global warming as well. And it gets into this cult mentality because no matter how much negative information is surfacing regarding the harm and ineffectiveness of vaccines, the pro-vaxxers are still, we believe it's a post-truth world, we don't care what the actual facts are, we believe the vaccines are doing a good thing. And again, in times past, there were vaccines that seemed to work. A mild injected version of a disease would protect against the actual disease. But these days, the vaccines are being marketed to people who are never going to be exposed to those illnesses. Maybe that's why they're letting all these refugees and illegal immigrants with diseases into the country. Nothing like a good pandemic to drive up the medical industrial complex stock market. And we have, as a result of the open borders, we have illnesses now being reintroduced to the United States that have been eradicated for decades, if not generations. And that means our immune systems are not ready for them. Scabies, H1N1, at least one case of bubonic plague, and now leprosy. It's like we really are going back to the Dark Ages, where there are going to be these rotting people who look like zombies walking around the streets, and everyone's going to be screaming, "Unclean, unclean." But it's a belief system, like human-caused global warming, like private central banking. Now, Peggy Whitson is an astronaut, and she just broke the U.S. spaceflight record of 534 days in space. And that's a long time to be in space. And I imagine, based on some of what we saw from the other long-duration astronauts, it will be very difficult for her to readjust to life back on Earth, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. And apparently Donald Trump was very impressed, and he made a phone call to her on the ISS from the Oval Office, and he said that he was more impressed with her than politicians. And I certainly second that notion as well. But congratulations to Peggy. She's done good, and I'm glad to see NASA getting back into space and less involved with rubber stamping Al Gore's propaganda. Now, we've been talking about Cassini, and it is nearing the end of its mission. It basically did a gravitational slingshot around Saturn's moon Titan that is sending it through the gap between the rings and the planet. Going to get some real close-ups. Unfortunately, the end of the orbit in September will be crashing into the atmosphere of Saturn. But the mission is pretty much over, and they got the information. And as a bonus, they managed to get some additional images of Titan itself. And I have to tell you, I am very curious about Titan. And I know a lot of people are talking about life on the other worlds and so forth, and I'm convinced that we found it on Mars with Viking, with Dr. Gilbert Levin's labeled release experiment. A lot of other scientists agree with that. But I think if you're really interested in finding extraterrestrial life, you go look in places where life as we know it cannot possibly exist. See, because NASA declared the LRE data on Viking null and void and went with the GCMS, and we've since learned the GCMS wouldn't have worked anyway. It was a false negative. All subsequent missions to Mars were not sterilized. And bacteria can be very, very rugged. They have a process called incestation, where if they're in a hostile environment, they literally create a hard shell around themselves. And they could very easily travel to Mars on the spaceship and adapt to the environment. So when we confirm the presence of life on Mars, which is inevitable at this point, it's going to be a necessary extra step. Is this really indigenous to Mars or something that hitched a ride from Earth? That's going to be very complex. Now, Titan represents a chance to see if life is forming in a truly alien environment. Instead of water, it's liquid methane. And the biochemistry is going to be so radically different, I think it would be worth another look at Titan. They're already planning missions to some of Saturn and Jupiter's moons that seem to have liquid water underneath an ice shell. They're going to be looking for life down there using technology they're developing down in Antarctica at a place called Lake Vostok, where there's a huge body of water that has been literally cut off from the outside world for thousands of years. And they're drilling down there with drills, everything sterilized. They don't want to contaminate the water, and they're looking for life down there as well. But I think if you want to validate that life is going to emerge in all circumstances, we ought to go back to Titan. Because I think most exobiologists are being very species chauvinists. They always talk about life as we know it. Let's go find life as we know it. Okay, well, that's all well and good. But I think that you're going to find self-organization in all kinds of chemistries, in all kinds of environments. Look at some of the extremophiles in our own world, such as the deep crust microbes or the fish swimming in freezing water at the Arctic pole, Arctic ice caps. They're already living in conditions that would be fatal to us. Or the life forms around those deep ocean thermal vents, they're based on a very different chemistry. One that would be very toxic to us. So if you have the basic raw materials and a source of energy and a fluid medium, sooner or later you're going to get that first self-replicating molecule. And that is all it takes to start. So that's why I'm curious about Titan. I think it would be really, really cool to send another lander there with a microscope and just scoop some of that liquid methane tar out of the oceans and just take a look and see if anything's swimming around in. Now, last week there was this power outage, and it hit San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. Those were the main areas that were hit. Of course, everybody was getting on the blog saying, oh, it's a cyber attack, it's terrorists and terrorists. What they're basically saying is that these power stations were brought down by a geomagnetic storm because right now there is what is called the hole in the sun's corona. Now, this is a phenomenon that happens every once in a while, but it means the sun showers the Earth with much more energetic particles. And those particles will start playing games with the Earth's magnetosphere. And that, in turn, can induce wild voltage fluctuations in long transmission lines, those high-tension lines. And that, in turn, can cause blackouts. The great New York City blackout was finally traced back to the sun. And apparently our power distribution systems are not robust enough quite yet to deal with this kind of an issue. But it does happen. Space weather is a reality. Okay, now then, let's see. What else are we going to talk about? U.S. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren has given Donald Trump an F for his first 100 days. I would probably say D- is more accurate here. But that 100-day thing, it's kind of an arbitrary limit. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not a deadline for things to be done. And I think too much emphasis was placed on it. But certainly, to date, Donald Trump has been a tremendous disappointment to those of us who supported him, especially in those two areas of paramount interest to the American people, the economy and the wars. And the economy is still moving forward toward a lockup or a collapse. And we're still on board the war agenda. If anything, it seems like the war agenda has accelerated. And we're obviously very concerned about a shooting war in North Korea as early as tomorrow. Well, actually, it's already the morning of Wednesday over there in the Koreas. And this thing actually could spin completely out of control. Now then, Saudi Arabia is the 12th worst country for women, and yet somehow received a spot on the United Nations Women's Rights Commission. Seems a little weird to me, but that's what happened over there. More ramping up of the booga booga. Secretary of Homeland Security General John Kelly said he believes President Trump will be dealing with a nuclear North Korea able to strike America by the end of his first term. Okay, let's go on back and ask, why would North Korea strike the United States knowing it would mean the destruction of their entire nation? And the answer is they wouldn't. North Korea wants nuclear weapons as a deterrent to being invaded. Because North Korea is looking at all the U.S. invasions, overthrows, coups d'etats, regime changes of the last 16 years, and they all have one feature in common. These countries didn't have the means to discourage a foreign invader. The U.S. is getting butch, whooping on defenseless countries. The United States has, if not the world's largest nuclear arsenal, one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals. Nobody is going to attack us without a really good reason, because it's national suicide. But they're still out there pushing this thing. Oh, it's nuclear. Saddam has nukes. Assad has gas. North Korea is going crazy. Somebody wrote on in and said, well, you know, your thing about no first strike would make sense if Kim Jong-un wasn't such a complete nutcase paranoid goofball. And my response to that, and your response to that, should be everything you think you know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un has been handed to you by the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. And you need to keep that in mind. The corporate media is not there to tell you the truth. The corporate media is there to sell you things. The next car, the next fashion, the next vaccine, the next candidate, the next policy, the next tax, the next war. That's what they're in the job to do. And they're trying to sell us another war. And I think a primary reason they're pushing on North Korea right now is the realization that nobody really believed that nonsense about Assad gassing his own people. And I'm very concerned about a false flag of some kind to trigger this war into moving forward here. Okay, apparently Labour over in Great Britain is trashing the Tory plan for a hard Brexit. The debate has now moved away from will Brexit go forward or not into whether it's a hard Brexit, meaning we're going to leave now, or a soft Brexit, meaning we're going to do it very, 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 very slowly. And obviously the Remainers who are not going to get their Remain, they're pushing for the soft Brexit. So there's a lot of turmoil over there as well. And certainly most of the ordinary people of Europe, just like they don't want a new world war, they're sick and tired of the EU. The European Union was supposed to be all about free trade, free travel. That was it. And Brussels has turned into this absolutely tyrannical, unaccountable ruling body. And the people of Europe are very unhappy. It's almost like the Nazis won World War II, and they're still under that dictatorship. And they do not like it. Okay, somebody just put up an article at the website from the Discovery Channel. Tests prove depleted uranium scrambles the chromosomes. And as I mentioned before, one of the big secrets being kept by the U.S. military is if you are a veteran of any war zone where depleted uranium munitions were being used, and you get a lungful of that dust, there's a good chance when you try and have a family, you're going to have a severely malformed child. And that is a terrible, terrible sacrifice to ask anybody to make. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. And we're talking about how the job of the corporate media is to sell you things, sell you ideas, keep you loyal to the corporations, keep the money flowing from you to the money junkies. And I think this is a really good example here because I'm looking at this article over at signsoftheTime.net. And it's talking about how the corporate media is now trying to push the idea that eating unprocessed food is a dangerous cult. You're risking your health if you're not eating fully processed foods. Now, we know that in the latest psychological diagnostic manual, where they've taken virtually every normal human behavior and turned it into a mental illness, they actually have defined the desire to eat healthy food as a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. And so this is obviously pandering. They want you to go on buying the food product of these corporations, which are filled with all kinds of chemicals and fillers and even chemicals that make you want to eat more. And so they're out there with the corporate media saying it's a dangerous cult to want to eat clean, organic, unprocessed foods, and you're endangering your health. And it really is an absurd thing for them to be saying, but then that's what they're paid to do. And we are seeing media attacks on those who question the safety of vaccines. Just smear jobs. They don't have They don't have any research except that one CDC report, which has now been exposed as being a fraud. The CDC's report that said there is no link between vaccines and autism has been exposed as a fraud by its chief author, William Thompson, who came on out and said they cherry-picked the data. And then we had that other gentleman, former CDC official, went public on video saying that in 17 different cases, when they were running studies to see if there was a link between vaccines and autism, 17, they found the links and then they changed the protocol. They kept trying over and over again, changing the protocol until they got the desired result. And that vaccine injury court, that is the catch-all for all vaccine-injured people, relies on that original CDC report in order to deny any support to the parents of vaccine-damaged children. It's all about protecting the corporations and the corporations' profits. And it is obscene to see it happening. I don't think it's a mental illness to want to eat natural food. And again, I'm a farm kid. You know, we used to go, it's lunchtime. All right, let's go out to the garden. And we'd get what we were going to eat there. Or in the barn. Milk the cow. Go to the chicken coop. Get some eggs. We weren't a dangerous cult. That was normal life. But in corporate fascist America, they want you to have to pay a corporation for absolutely everything you need, including now water. And next, it'll be air. Oh, anybody who wants to breathe the air in the atmosphere, they're a sicko. You need your bottled and canned and flavored air. It really is the height of absurdity. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get things done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, share what you know with everyone you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.